11,600 years ago. Humanity wasn't supposed to be capable of this. This is older than the pyramids, older than the Great Pyramid. It is even older than the legendary Stonehenge, built before farming even existed. No crops, no cities, no metal tools. And yet, they built this, hidden under a hill in modern-day Turkey. Some of these stones weigh over 15 tons. The pillars are covered in carvings of deadly predators. Snakes, scorpions, vultures. The stones are arranged in perfect, mysterious circles. This complex arrangement certainly wasn't random. Every detail of this site was meticulously planned. This required hundreds of people, but history says they were just wandering hunters. This site breaks that story, and here's the part no one expected. The site was not destroyed by the passage of time, and it was not simply abandoned to the elements. The people who built it actually chose to bury it. They did this intentionally, and for a specific purpose. They covered it up, slowly, layer by layer. They hid their greatest creation, and then they left. For 10,000 years, no one knew. It remained a secret until we finally uncovered it. And then we realized something truly terrifying. Civilization didn't start the way we thought. What if belief came before survival? What if religion built civilization, and then they erased it? Why bury the beginning of humanity? A place like this simply shouldn't exist. And yet, here it is, because it actually does. And the reason might change everything we know about who we are. For decades, this was just a hill. No signs, no monuments, nothing special. In the 1960s, researchers walked past it. They thought it was medieval rubble, and so they moved on. Then in the 1990s, everything changed. A German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt looked closer. He noticed carved limestone fragments scattered on the surface. These were certainly not medieval, so he decided to start digging. And what emerged shocked everyone. A towering T-shaped monolith, far too large for a simple settlement. And then he found another circle, and then yet another one, dating back to 9600 BCE, thousands of years before the pyramids. This wasn't a small mistake in history. This was a total rewrite. The entire origin story of civilization cracked, because hunter-gatherers weren't supposed to build temples. They were supposed to struggle to survive. No, this wasn't just survival. This was clearly organized belief, and it sat hidden for 10,000 years. It was buried quite deliberately. Schmidt believed this was the world's first temple, and if he was right, then everything we thought we knew was backwards. Farming did not create civilization. Civilization may have started here, and the world almost never knew. This wasn't just an archaeological discovery. It was an intellectual earthquake. For over a century, history taught us a simple story. First, humans were hunter-gatherers. Then they learned to farm, and soon farming created villages, and those villages became cities. And only then came temples. Survival first, belief later. That is the standard model. Then Göbekli Tepe appeared, and the timeline simply snapped. This site actually predates agriculture by many thousands of years. This is not a village. This is not survival shelter. This structure is a temple. Temple came first. These were people living without any farms. Yet somehow they built these monuments. They gathered in massive numbers. They organized and held massive feasts. They coordinated their labor effectively. This requires a complex social structure. This requires a shared belief. It was not just survival. The order was completely wrong. What if belief actually came first? What if religion pulled humans together and farming followed because of it? It is not survival creating belief, but rather belief creating survival. If that hypothesis is true, then civilization didn't grow from hunger. It grew from deep meaning. It grew from their shared stories, from something bigger than survival. What if belief created civilization, not survival? And if that's true, Göbekli Tepe isn't just old. It's the beginning. Each of these pillars weighs between 10 and 20 tons. That's heavier than a modern truck. It was all carved from solid limestone. They did this with no metal tools. They had absolutely no wheels. There were no beasts of burden. The quarry sits just a few hundred meters away. Some pillars were carved directly from the bedrock. Teams chipped away with stone tools. They likely used wooden levers and rope. They likely used wooden logs as rollers. This work required immense manpower, possibly hundreds of coordinated workers. Not chaos, organization. The stone circles are perfectly symmetrical. It shows deliberate geometric placement. The artistry is incredibly detailed. 2 central monoliths dominate each circle. They even carved stylized human arms. These pillars likely represent beings. And yet, these people supposedly had no permanent settlements. How primitive were they, really? Primitive people do not build this. This level of work requires leadership. This requires food surplus, at least temporarily, and we find thousands of animal bones here. They are mostly from wild gazelle, suggesting seasonal mass gatherings happened here. This clearly wasn't alien technology. This was ancient human engineering. It was a feat of human cooperation, driven by powerful human belief. And that may be the most dangerous idea of all, because if hunter-gatherers could organize something this complex, then maybe we've underestimated the ancient mind. From the very beginning, look closely at the carvings. Cold-blooded snakes emerging from the ancient stone. Vultures waiting patiently for the inevitable end. Predatory foxes, frozen in a permanent prowl. Scorpions, boars, predators. This is not decorative art. This is not storytelling for children. These are the harsh and unforgiving animals of survival. Deadly animals that were born to kill and consume. Animals that feed on the dead. Some researchers believe this was connected to death rituals. One carving even shows a headless human figure, with vultures waiting patiently in the shadows nearby. This has led to the sky burial theory, the idea that bodies were exposed and left for vultures to consume. Here at Göbekli Tepe, death was never meant to be hidden. Death was central to their entire existence and world. Imagine gathering here at night, surrounded by predators carved in stone. This is a deliberate and chilling psychological design. This is fear made permanent. The deep haunting and primal fear of death itself. The overwhelming and constant fear of the natural world. And fear of something greater than the individual. This was never just random or mindless terror. It was a complex, measured, and organized symbolism. Shared fear creates shared identity, and shared identity creates civilization. What if fear was the glue? What if confronting the heavy mystery of death together was the key? Was it the very first step toward building an organized society? These pillars may represent beings, ancient beings, silently watching over the sacred ritual. Stone giants judging those who gathered in the darkness below. A constant and chilling reminder for every person there that survival wasn't enough, meaning was. This wasn't just a simple village. No homes, no hearths, no daily life debris. What they found were just monumental stone enclosures. Hunter-gatherer groups likely moved seasonally, constantly following the natural animal migrations. But at certain times of year, they may have gathered here. Thousands of animal bones were found at the site. The remains were mostly wild gazelle and a large amount of wild boar. Evidence of massive, large-scale butchering. This clearly wasn't just small family meals. This discovery looks like massive feasting. These were true mass gatherings, involving possibly hundreds of people, coming together from many different groups. People with many different identities, all unified by a single shared ritual, driven by a powerful shared belief, bound together by a shared myth. If they returned here seasonally, they needed predictable food sources, and wild wheat grew in this region. What if managing food started Was it to support these massive gatherings? It was not farming that was creating temples. It was the temples themselves demanding farming. Large rituals like these require intense planning, and all that planning requires stability. Stability begins to look like settlement, and settlement becomes civilization. So here's the massive idea. Did religion force humans to settle? Did their shared belief demand the birth of agriculture? Did shared myth reshape human behavior? If that's true, then civilization wasn't born from hunger. It was born from faith. Now we come to the strangest part. It didn't collapse. No burn layers, no signs of invasion, no structural failure. It was filled in. Deliberately, thousands of tons of rubble, layer by layer, carefully packed. Not random dumping, it was a controlled closure. They buried their own monument and turned it back into a hill, as if it had never existed. They didn't smash it, they didn't desecrate it. They preserved it, which means this wasn't destruction. This was intention. Imagine the moment. The decision. The first layer, the second, until the center disappeared and the gathering place was gone. Why hide your greatest achievement? Why erase the beginning? Why seal your gods beneath the earth? This wasn't collapse, this was choice, and choice implies meaning. And whatever that meaning was, it was powerful enough to bury the birthplace of civilization. So what is the explanation for this burial? The first theory is simple. Some ancient cultures closed sacred spaces. They did not destroy these sites. They chose to bury them instead, as a form of protection. This is called ritual closure. When a sacred space had fulfilled its purpose, it was completely and carefully sealed. And that would explain the preservation. The intricate carvings were not smashed. The great pillars were not toppled. The fill material was quite deliberate. For many archaeologists, this is the safest answer. It perfectly fits all the available evidence. Perhaps the community decided the site had served its role, and they ceremonially sealed it away. It was a form of sacred retirement. It is a perfectly reasonable answer. It is a logical way to see it, but it feels incomplete. This wasn't a small shrine. This was the center of something enormous, a massive central gathering point, and right after its burial, human life began to change. Permanent settlements then started forming, and the practice of agriculture slowly expanded throughout the entire region. So maybe this wasn't retirement. Maybe it was a total replacement. When society begins to change, old centers slowly lose their power. The sacred retirement theory is safe, but Göbekli Tepe doesn't feel safe. Here's the more uncomfortable theory. Around this time, agriculture begins. Wild grains start being managed. At this critical juncture, permanent settlements begin forming. People finally stop moving from place to place, seasonally. And in these new foundations, they stay. And when people stay, power shifts. Göbekli Tepe was a ritual center, but the organized villages create a new daily authority. Large-scale food storage means direct social control, and this control quickly translates into social hierarchy. And hierarchy doesn't need distant ritual sites. Instead, the society builds entirely new centers, centers that are much closer to the homes of the people. When the very fabric of society begins to change, the old gods of the past slowly lose their influence, and the ancient, distant rituals begin to lose their power. In their place, entirely new leaders begin to emerge. Those who control food control people, and ritual centers become obsolete. Maybe Göbekli Tepe wasn't simply retired after all. Maybe it was intentionally and systematically replaced. Farming ties people to land. These physical ties to the land create social structure, and this structure creates a localized sense of authority. And authority doesn't like competition. If power moved to the villages, then this place represented the old order, and burying it wasn't spiritual. The burial of this site was, in truth, deeply political. When society evolves, symbols of the past can become threats. Maybe they buried Göbekli Tepe not to protect it, but to close an era. And when power shifts, history gets rewritten. There is, however, another possibility. The world itself was changing. This was the end of the last ice age, a period of sudden climate instability. Known as the Younger Dryas, global temperatures began to shift drastically. The ancient rainfall patterns changed forever. Natural resources became completely unpredictable, and for hunter-gatherers, unpredictability is danger. Vast animal migrations began to shift. Essential water sources started to move. Human communities came under immense stress, and intense stress changes human behavior. Maybe burying this place wasn't spiritual. Maybe the reason was purely practical. A massive open structure like this one, a massive stone structure like this always requires constant maintenance. And maintenance requires total stability. If survival becomes the ultimate priority, then ritual always becomes secondary. Maybe they sealed it to focus on survival. Protect it, preserve it, and it was time for them to move on. Or maybe it symbolized something deeper. The end of an era, the end of a world they understood, and perhaps the entire burial process was intended as a final ritual goodbye. It was a final and symbolic reset. When the global climate shifts forever, human systems shift with it. Maybe they buried Göbekli Tepe not out of faith, not out of politics, but perhaps it was born out of fear. And when the world changes, civilizations adapt, even if that means burying their beginning. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe this isn't unusual. It's a pattern we see. Humans build monuments. It's in our nature. They abandon them, letting nature take them back. They outgrow them, finding new ways to live. They leave them behind, markers of a past era. This is not unique. History repeats itself, and it's not ancient. We see it in our modern world. Cities rise, full of life and light. Cities fall, returning to the earth once more. What we're seeing at Göbekli Tepe is a pattern etched into the very stones. Humans build symbols to define their world. They pour meaning into stone. Then their lives change, and they move on. Their priorities shift with the seasons of time, and the old symbols lose relevance. This isn't failure. It's the cycle of life. It's evolution, the constant forward motion. Belief systems evolve, changing like the light. Political systems evolve, rising and falling away. Social structures evolve, building on the old. And sometimes evolution looks like erasure. We bury our past, layer by layer, year by year. Not because it failed, but because it's finished. But because we've changed, and our needs are new. Göbekli Tepe isn't a mystery of incompetence. It's a mirror, reflecting our own journey back. It shows us what humans always do. We build meaning in every age we inhabit. Oh, continuing, we build meaning, we outgrow meaning and let the stones stand. Continuing, we outgrow meaning, and then we move on. And the cycle continues. Music fades out. Here's what makes this even more unsettling. What we're looking at is only a fraction of the site. Archaeologists estimate that less than 10% has been excavated. The rest still lies underground. Geophysical surveys suggest more structures. There are more circular enclosures hidden here, possibly dozens, stacked beneath layers of time. And the excavation process is slow, painfully slow. Because once you dig, you can't put it back. So preservation is what matters. This isn't a rushed discovery. It is a controlled pause. Experts believe that 90% remains hidden. And we don't yet know how large this place truly was, or how long it was used, or how many generations gathered here. We see fragments, but not the full story. This isn't a solved mystery, It's an unfinished chapter, frozen in time, paused. But this history is not lost, and the mystery is definitely not solved. It is simply waiting for us to understand, and that's what makes Göbekli Tepe powerful. It's not a finished story. It's a story we've only just begun to uncover. 11,600 years ago, this was long before cities were built, and long before farming ever began. Before what we call civilization, humans built something that unified them. It was not achieved through force. It was not ordered by any kings. It rose solely through shared belief. People gathered here from afar. Together they organized themselves. Within these stones, they created meaning. And then everything changed. They deliberately buried the site, not because their culture failed, but because they themselves changed. Their entire world had shifted. Their life's priorities shifted too, and the old center no longer defined them. So they sealed the temple forever and simply moved forward into time. This isn't a mystery of incompetence. It is a recurring historical pattern. Humans always strive to build meaning. Eventually, they outgrow that meaning, and then they replace it. Civilization didn't begin with farming. Civilization truly began with belief, and when that core belief changed, they simply buried their old gods and began building something new. And maybe one day, we'll understand why.